Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby Laws, and this is my co-host.
Christopher Wells.
We're coming at you guys with a live episode. Pretty much recapping today's games. Very intriguing. I think it does set up some of the Eastern conference playoffs, but there were some interesting ramifications. We'll talk about both games, but I guess we'll start with the Miami Heat one. They played against the Philadelphia 76ers, and yeah, very intriguing. I think that's the best, hey, what's up, Moverse? I think this is the best description that you could possibly have of the game. Very back and forth at times, but at other times, people looked a little bit slow, sluggish, but I'll let you talk about Philly and what you thought about the game from their perspective.
It's honestly really funny how different that those two playing games were. I mean, the first game was, the score was what, 51-39 at halftime. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody could really consistently hit shots. The Heat were, using zone defense against the Sixers. They just looked like they, couldn't really figure out how to beat it. A lot of turnovers, a lot of missed shots from basically everybody. Embiid looked a step slow, right? It made, especially in the first half, right, where he just didn't really look aggressive, didn't really look confident. And then in the second half, everything changed, right? Eventually, the shots started to fall, right? Nicholas Batum, right? He was kind of the hero of the game for Philly, where every time they needed a big three, he knocked it down, right? He had 20 points and, was again, if he doesn't have the game that he has, right, the Sixers probably go home, right? He had 20 points, 6 of 10 from three, 7 of 12 from the field. And he played great defense, too. I mean, you saw the plays where he was guarding Butler, he was guarding Hero, right? And this was, one of the reasons kind of why I think we thought that the Sixers were probably going to win this game. I mean, obviously, it didn't look like it, going into the first half, but just the Heat's offense has just really been a problem for them most of the season. And then, with Rozier being out, you really only have like basically two kind of go-to offensive guys. It's Hero and Butler. Butler got hurt early in the game,
Yeah.
and just really wasn't himself, right? He played 39 minutes, but was 5 of 18. Just couldn't really get going at any point. Especially late. Wasn't even out there right at the end. And it sounds like that he's got an MCL injury, which is not good. That probably means that his season might be done, which, like you said, kind of changes things up for the Heat. But for Philly, obviously they needed to win this game. They're at home. They were getting booed in the first half, getting booed for a good chunk of the third. And then what you needed to happen happened, right? Embiid got it going, and then you had just enough from other guys, right? Like Maxey, who didn't shoot very well, but still it was fine. Batum, obviously. Kelly Oubre, right in the fourth, right, made some big plays as well. So it sets up a matchup for them against the Knicks. We'll see how it goes. It really just kind of depends on how healthy Embiid is, because if he plays like how he played, tonight against, other teams, I don't think the Sixers have a great shot. I know he had a
Right.
big fourth quarter, but you're probably going to need better performances than that. But again, obviously everybody for the Sixers for the most part was cold. So you could just say it's just an outlier performance, but if he can, manage to kind of stick around and stay healthy, right, then that's where you might be able to give Philly a chance. And you'd rather face, I guess, the Knicks in the first round than the Celtics. I just think it's a lot tougher of a matchup. I think the Celtics are better than New York, but New York may pose some problems too. They do have some other bigs, 7-footers, some physical guys, and they have Brunson, right, obviously, and he can have some big games as well. I think the 76ers are favored right now over New York, right, according to a lot of the head-to-head stuff. But
Yeah.
we'll see. Like I said, it really just comes down to Embiid's health, and then after him, which other guys for the Sixers show up, right? Like, does Tyrese Maxey, play like how he's played for most of the regular season? Do you get enough from the role guys, right? Like Tobias Harris didn't really do much in this game, but they put Nick Batum in. They do have a lot of depth, right? I mean, like you at a lot of different positions, right? Because it's like you took out Harris, you put in Batum, right? You had Buddy Hield in there for a little bit, right? Lowry started with Maxey as he's kind of done for a while, right? Paul Reed was the backup big. So they do have, and I think Melton was hurt, so he wasn't
Yeah.
playing. He's had a back issue. So they do have a lot of guys. I'm just curious to see how Embiid can hold up in the postseason, because that's really always been the question for him. Because it's not really about the talent; it's about, it seems like by the time the postseason kind of comes around, he's worn down. And then in addition to that, he's already kind of not playing quite up to the level that he's playing in the regular season. So you put those two things together, And that's kind of why you're always kind of skeptical about, when you put the list of contenders in the East together. Philly is always kind of the one that you might be the most skeptical about because they have, probably the second best player in the Eastern Conference. But it just seems like every year they always find some way to come up short, whether it's injuries, whether it's, just poor performances. It just seems like something always goes wrong. And it's just really hard to trust them, even with the way Embiid played in the fourth.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, this game was pretty much uneventful in my opinion up until the fourth quarter. It's kind of wild that the highlight of the game was quite literally the free chicken. That was the turning point for the Philadelphia 76ers. Like you were saying, they were getting booed at home, and then the crowd kind of got into it after that. But yeah, Embiid, I don't really know how to feel about his performance. Like you said, he had a great fourth quarter, and he hit, a wide open three, which was kind of mind boggling why the Miami Heat would even give him that shot wide open like that, knowing that he's a decent 3-point shooter. But yeah, he looked a little slow. He looked a little sluggish. And I guess that's just due to the fact that he hasn't really played that much, since coming back. So, where do they go from there? I guess, like you said, you really just need Embiid to be healthy in the next series. But I'm really looking at Miami now. Like, I think we all knew that this was going to happen, maybe not this close, but we did think that the Philadelphia 76ers were going to eventually move on to face the Knicks. But now you're looking at Miami, without Jimmy Butler. I think that's kind of a tall task potentially to have to face, Chicago, because I think Chicago's got a lot of fight. They've got some intriguing defensive options as well to kind of mitigate Tyler Hero, kind of like how they did, how Philly did in this game, where they were switching Batum pretty much on to anybody who had the hot hand at the time. Like you said, Jimmy Butler didn't play that great, but when he was doing pretty well, Batum was on him. Then Tyler Hero started to warm up, and then, Batum kind of switched on to Tyler Hero at points. So I am curious what, the Miami Heat are going to do against Chicago. Or not, Chicago, excuse me. But yeah, like I am kind of puzzled. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about Miami, but I think now that Jimmy Butler is hurt, I think we do have to acknowledge that their season might be over.
And they were already without Rozier. We don't know if he's going to play in the next game. Maybe he does, but if you're, and he probably could have made a difference in this game, right? Because when they couldn't really, figure out ways to score, right, he'd be the other guy that you could turn to. So that way, you don't have to rely on basically just Tyler Hero when Jimmy Butler didn't have it, right? Hero was 9 for 27, at 25 points, right? And a lot of, most of his baskets were in the fourth quarter, which, was nice, but, you just didn't have enough. I mean, again, like, you look at the Sixers point spread, wasn't like they had a ton of guys that went off, but a lot of that kind of came in the second half when they really needed it. And for the Heat, a lot of their guys just kind of disappeared. And it really was kind of just, the stars, right? Because again, Butler just didn't have it, physically. And then, like you said, now you're kind of in a rough spot, because we'll get into the next game, right? But obviously, they already said Shams is saying that they fear that he's got some type of MCL injury, which could mean, I don't know if that means it's torn, or then they said he could be out indefinitely. So, if that's already what they're thinking without an MRI, then that's not good. Right, and that's unfortunate because this is, the second time that we've had, a guy get hurt, in a big playing game, and then they're probably going to be out for the next one. Yeah, according to Zay Williams, Miami done for. I mean, that's what it might be at this point.
Yeah.
Because if you're already without your best player, and then you're without, another guy that you really need some offensive juice for, and Terry Rozier, I don't know, because obviously the Hawks are, not really that good. So they made the Bulls, look a lot better than they actually are. But the Bulls already know what they are, right? They already have an identity. We already know, what they do on both ends of the floor. And they have their guys in their rotation that they're comfortable with, right? Even though they have other guys that are out, they've been playing without those guys for so long that they pretty much know how to handle these type of situations. So, yeah, I don't know. It's not looking great for the Heat.
Yeah, and yeah, the problem is, like, with the East right now, I think, there's not as much excitement, so it's a little bit harder to talk about and kind of show our excitement for it because there probably isn't a lot for both of us. But, I'm going to assume that, we're going to get a potential entertaining game, if Miami's backs are against the wall. But I don't know. I guess we should probably get into the second game because I think that's all we can really say about this initial one, unless you had anything else to say about it.
other than the fact that, obviously the Sixers move on to play the Knicks.
Yeah.
We'll see how that series goes. But yeah, so, I guess we'll get into the Hawks Bulls game.
Oh boy.
Uh, a completely different type of game.
Hmm.
A much higher scoring one, 131 to 116, right? The Bulls, I think, got to 111 after 3 quarters, right? So they had more points than either team scored in the entire game in the previous game. I mean, the Hawks, I don't really know what to say. I mean, it was pretty bad. We expected the Bulls to win. I don't necessarily know if we were expecting a blowout, but we definitely thought that the Bulls were in a better spot than the Hawks. The Hawks had kind of been reeling to close the season. They have some key guys out that they kind of need, and that they, like a Jalen Johnson, even a Sadiq Bey, or an Onyeka Okongwu or others. Like, it's just the defense, which was already bad with those guys, is now, even worse. I mean, it looked like two different, teams out there, like two different
Facts, yeah.
sports, right? It looked like maybe the Hawks were playing ping pong or something like that as opposed to basketball. But I mean, like, Kobe White and all these other guards, right? Ayo Dosunmu, and even like Caruso for a couple of baskets, Javante Green running right down the lane, getting dunks. The defense was pretty awful from the Hawks. And really this game was kind of just like a microcosm of their whole season, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like, either stuff like injuries, poor defense, guys that just don't really fit together, right? We kind of saw like the splits between DeJounte Murray and Trae Young, right? Where, even, obviously with Trae Young, he had the hand injury. So, it's not like he was 100%. He just recently came back. But, you kind of saw the issues in terms of the pairing of that backcourt together. It just seems like it just hasn't worked.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, it seemed like it was okay last year. I mean, they made the playoffs. They, competed against the Celtics in a 6-game series, took it further than I think most people expected. But this year, it's just been a disaster. And now you just kind of wonder, do you what do you do? Like, do you decide to trade one of them or both of them? Do you keep both of them? I don't really know what they're going to do. We've heard a lot of rumors about both of these guys, right? DeJounte Murray was in rumors at the trade deadline. Trae Young's been in of rumors or whatever for like a year plus at this point. So, um, I don't know what the Hawks do. Obviously, their season is done, so they got plenty of time to think about it. But kind of a rough way to go out.
Yeah, for sure. All things considered, I think Trae Young is probably done. I think he's going to request a trade. And in this game, he looked very bad. Didn't look 100% at all. The turnovers, the playmaking, everybody was kind of just off cue. And that's kind of what their season has been all year. Like, it's pretty much been like a DeJounte Murray good game or a Trae Young good game. It's never been like a game where both of them are kind of like on the same page. And that's a problem, I think. And that kind of signifies why they can't really move forward with both those guys. But how about the Bulls? I really liked what I saw from everybody on the court that played for the Bulls, honestly. And I think, Kobe White has kind of solidified, I think, his position as most improved for this year. At least he should be in theory. And I think, they were talking about it. I couldn't quite understand the conversation fully because I kind of tuned out for a little bit, but they were saying that I think these stats don't count or something like that. So like this won't be his like career high or whatever, right?
Yeah, playing stats don't count towards it.
Yeah. But regardless, monster stats from him. Very good game from Vucevic. That was kind of interesting. Pretty much the same thing that he's been doing all year, except for scoring threes. His 3-point percentage just completely dropped off.
For 6.
Exactly. So, that continued. But regardless, you also have to like what DeRozan was able to do. Caruso did a good job on defense, but then, he kind of got injured and then he was out. And I think we just got a notification he's doubtful for the Heat. So that's something to watch, and I think that could potentially shift a little bit of momentum. But you also have Dosunmu, who can also play some great defense as well, and he did a very good job offensively and defensively. So, like I said, I liked everything that I saw from the Bulls. I didn't think it was going to be this lopsided, but we kind of did foresee that the Chicago Bulls would get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, the defense for the Bulls is better than the Hawks, and then their offensive guards could just basically get to wherever they wanted. I mean, not even just the guards, everybody. I mean, like, everybody in the starting 5 shot.
Bless you.
Excuse me. Shot over 50. Thank you. Shot over 50%. I mean, Dosunmu was 67%. Kobe White was 71% from the field, right? Mostly drives to the basket, right? Vucevic was at 52%. Caruso, only took 3 shots, but made 2 of them. And DeRozan was 53%, 10 of 19. So, I mean, as a team, they shot 57%. So, I mean,
Yeah.
there wasn't a whole lot of defensive resistance. And I mean, again, with the Hawks, they had mentioned that they only had like one guy that was basically, height wise between like 6'6", 6'9", or whatever, right? And
Right.
that was Andre Hunter, who was not very good himself in this game, right? 3 for 16, 0 for 7 from three. I think at one point he was like 1 for or 0 for 8 or something like
Yeah.
that, but just wasn't great. I mean, you can look at the plus minuses and you can kind of figure out which guys for the Hawks really struggled the most. I
Hmm.
mean, so that kind of explains that one. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but either way, like you said, with the Bulls, there's a lot of positives from that. And again, with the Bulls, all season, this has kind of been, their group of guys outside of, Levine, who played earlier in the year. Um, so again, they just have been the more comfortable team. And DeRozan, right, has been great for most of this year, right, especially in crunch time. Didn't need it this game because this game was not close. Although it was funny because it was a 3-point game, I think, midway through the third, and then just like in the first quarter, the Bulls just went on this huge run to basically put the game away and out of reach. I mean, yeah, it looked like the Hawks were ready for Cancun, and it looked like the Bulls were ready to fight again, live another day, and they got a break with the Butler injury because they might have a chance to go into Miami and win that game that you wouldn't expect them to win, and then before you know it, they're in the playoffs. And they're playing the Celtics in the first round, right? I don't think people are going to give them too much of a shot to beat them. We'll see if they can make it semi-competitive. I don't know. The Bulls and the Celtics seem like the last few years they've always kind of played competitive matchups in the regular season, but this is the playoffs, so it could be different. Um, so I mean, for the Bulls, I mean, again, it's cool that you're having a good chance to make the playoffs. I guess it'll probably change their draft pick a little bit, depending on what happens. But either way, I mean, this was kind of what they wanted to do. So I guess they kind of accomplished their mission. Congrats on being 9, maybe 8. We'll see. So that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah, and I feel like if you're a Bulls fan, you do have to feel a little bit better than how you did earlier in the season.
Hey, William. Yeah, go on.
No, I'm just saying, like, you just got to feel a little bit better than how you did earlier. And at least you know what you've got in Kobe White, and DeMar DeRozan. So, and
I think
you just got to figure out what you're going to do, with Levine and Lonzo, if and when they come back.
Yeah, and I think it kind of also, like you said, kind of paves the way for if you're the Bulls, what your offseason plans could be, right? Because,
Yeah.
you haven't had Lonzo in pretty much forever, right? And Levine, you just gave a huge contract to, but you've honestly been relatively fine without him. So you might be okay with moving him, even if you don't really get a lot back, because you already have like a potentially, core guy in Kobe White. Maybe you resign, bring back DeRozan. I don't know. But at the very least, you have some guys that you feel relatively confident about, right? They recently, I think they re-signed Dosunmu before the season, so he's pretty much locked up for a while. So I mean, I guess that's the cool thing. According to Zay Williams, the East blows. My God, yeah. I mean, that's kind
That's
of
what
been
it
the
feels.
case, a little while. I think the East. I want to say, I think it was the year Golden State won. I think that year the East was a little bit better. I'm not saying that it was better than the West, but like you had some good teams that year. Like because the West I think was kind of weak that year, mainly because there were a lot of injuries, right? Because you had the Suns winning almost 70 games and then just kind of folding, and then you had Golden State, and after that, that was pretty much it. I know you had Memphis. They were kind of young. And Dallas wasn't ready yet, but that was probably the only year I can remember in recent memory where I'm like the East might be better than the West. But even
Yeah.
though obviously the Western team won that year, but still.
Yeah,
But
it's kind of how it's been for the past couple of years.
yeah, so I mean, yeah, that's how it's been for a while. I mean, again, like the 9-10 playing game this time around, you already knew. Look at the records, right? Both the Bulls and the Hawks were below 500. Bulls were what, 39 and 43. The Hawks were 36 and 46. So they were 10 games under 500. They're the 10 seed. Then you look out west, right? And then Golden State is like 10 games above 500 as the 10 seed in the West. So that's just kind of how it goes. Um, with the playing, because you have to make the rules equal for both conferences. I know some people have thrown out the idea of maybe like if a team doesn't get to a certain record or amount of wins, for another team, maybe they don't get in. But you have to make it fair for both. It just means you're gonna get some teams that probably shouldn't really be in a playoff setting, but they are. So
Yeah, I guess from here we should probably preview Bulls versus Heat a little bit. I guess.
Yeah.
We got the update from we got the update that Caruso is doubtful with the right foot sprain, and I think it was when he actually collided with Drummond, and Drummond
Yeah.
stepped on his foot.
Yeah.
So that's always nice.
Yeah, that wasn't amazing to see. Yeah,
Yeah.
that wasn't great.
So that happened. And then also from the Heat side, I'm gonna assume Jimmy Butler probably isn't playing either. So you're out with some key guys on both ends. But kind of just off of first glance and just off the top of our heads, who do we think is gonna win this one? I'm probably picking the Bulls. That's just how I feel. I think there's a little bit of momentum shift there, but the Bulls don't really have a Bam. I think that's something that the Heat do have, but he's just got to show up.
I mean, again, this is kind of a game where if Butler's out, and to be fair, they've had some experience with Jimmy Butler being out. It's just if he's going to be out, you need everybody else available. And I
Mm-hmm.
just think if you're going to find ways to score, Rozier has to be able to get out there and play because if he doesn't, I just don't really think you can really trust just Tyler Hero kind of on his own as the main offensive guy. I just don't think you can really trust that. I know Bam is their second best player after Jimmy, and he probably has been better than Jimmy for a good chunk of this year. But obviously his offense kind of comes and goes at different points. Just it kind of depends on the matchup. Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like Hero's the perimeter guy, and I don't know. Tyler Hero versus DeRozan, and then the Bulls have those other guards. The Heat's defense is nowhere near as bad as the Hawks,
Right.
so it probably will be a lower-ish scoring game. It just I don't know. It just kind of feels like that with the Butler injury, that kind of takes the Heat's wind out of their sails because we if he's out indefinitely, he may not even be back by the time the postseason starts. So I don't know. I think right now you probably have to lean Chicago just because you just don't know what you're going to get from Miami without Butler. Yeah, Zay Williams says I'm taking Bulls. I think at this point with the Jimmy injury, you kind of almost have to. Obviously,
Absolutely.
anything can happen in a one game scenario, right? We saw, and I guess we'll get into the West, 8-9 playing matchup because that'll be happening, I think, Friday, right? We saw in that game, right? In the game between New Orleans and LA, right? Zion gets hurt, and now he's going to be out for this playing game, and he's going to be out for at least 2 weeks. So that means that even if New Orleans manages to win that Sacramento game, you're still going to be without Zion for probably half that series, depending on how long it takes for him to come back. So playing's been kind of brutal for a lot of these teams this year, where it's just like, you had a lot of stars that were healthy this year. Then you had a couple just get hurt right at the wrong time. And now their seasons are over, even though those teams were, in the 7-8 spot. So pretty rough. But, you can also look at it from the other perspective where it gives you a chance if you're like a 9-10 seed to possibly get in. So maybe if you had some rough injuries or whatever, you get a little bit of a buffer. So, but
Yeah.
I think you have to go with the Bulls for
Okay.
now.
Yeah. So we're both with the Bulls. I think that's kind of like a given at this point. And I guess, like you said, to move on and preview, the Pelicans versus the Kings. I think this is going to be intriguing. Last night, I think I said that I was going to take the Kings, and I think I'm going to. No, I think I said the Pelicans. That's who I said. I'm going to stand on that. I think, with or without Zion, I do like the Pelicans a little bit more. Going to continue to sleep on the Kings. And yeah, it does suck that they're without Zion. That's really the main thing because he was having like a blast pretty much. He was just like you said, one man army last night until he got hurt because it was an extraordinary game. Regardless, though, it is intriguing. And then the winner of that game, hey, you gotta play the Thunder, right? So that should be intriguing as well, because the Thunder are probably like the one team that you want to target outside of Minnesota potentially, if you are at the bottom of the standings and such. But who knows? But yeah, I'm gonna take the Pelicans on this one.
Yeah, this one is tough because it's
Hmm.
like again, the reason why you could lean towards New Orleans is because they have more depth. I think than Sacramento.
Yeah,
Um, again, even without Zion, you have Ingram, you have Trey Murphy, you have CJ. You still have Valanciunas, Larry Nance, Alvarado. So you just have more playable guys. It's just a matter of really, I think it kind of depends on Brandon Ingram, right? Because he was fine in that last regular season game against the Lakers, but in the playing game, he was awful, right? He didn't even close. Willie Green basically just was not going to play him at all because he wasn't doing anything. He wasn't doing anything on offense. He's already not a great defender. So I think you really have to have, a big Ingram game. And who knows if we can get it,
Yeah.
because he's been out for, he was out for what, 12 games. Um, and I mean, he just hasn't looked this. He just hasn't been the same since that point. And I think you at least need him if you're going to be able to, beat the Kings. So I don't know. I might have to slightly lean towards Sacramento,
Okay.
but only by a little bit because it's just like we saw how the Warriors game went. The shooting was really good in that game, but I think a lot of that was just the Warriors defense was kind of pathetic. I think for the most part, like I think New Orleans can put up a better defensive effort than what we saw against the Kings. I just think they probably have some better defensive personnel um, in a one game playing setting. I just don't know because again, like the way Zion played, and I just don't see Ingram really being able to match that. It's just
Yeah, yeah.
but it does come. But again, if he's not going to play that great, then that means you have to have more from the other guys, and it helps to have more depth. But I don't know. The Kings have really kind of just surprised me with the way that because they were reeling, towards the end of the season. They haven't had Malik Monk, right? Kevin Herter's been out, but you're okay with that loss when you have Keon Ellis. But they've been able to kind of find ways to defend. It just kind of comes down to, again, can you have a big game from, Fox? Sabonis, I would think, could probably have a better game. I know he wasn't bad against Golden State, but he could probably have a better game. And I think the Kings, if you can manage to get out of there alive, they've matched up against not Golden State, OKC pretty well this year. Obviously some of those were with Monk, right? For the most part.
Hmm.
I think the last game that they played OKC, barely won. Because the Kings just couldn't really find as consistent ways to score. But, I don't know. Like, I'm just kind of 50-50, but it's almost like, maybe 51-49 Kings, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if New Orleans just has a hot shooting night and they just kind of just run out of it with this one. It's just, it's going to be tough because now it's like if you get in there and you play OKC, you're not going to have Zion, and that makes that matchup a lot more difficult. Um, just because again, he's been their best player pretty much as of late. And I know they made the playoffs 2 years ago without him, but this is a tougher matchup, I think. But we'll see though, because again, the Kings didn't really expect that performance from them honestly against Golden State, and that's kind of how the plan goes. Because you can if you hit a ton of threes in a game, and you play good defense, that sometimes can swing the tie, as opposed to a 7 game series. That's kind of the tough part with predicting these playing games.
Yeah. What do you think New Orleans is going to try and do lineup wise? Do you think they're going to play small? Do you think they're going to play bigger? Would they put Nance out there instead of Zion, or do they go a little bit smaller, maybe put in like a Trey Murphy in the starting lineup? What do you think about what they're going to potentially do? Because I think we're
I
going to
mean,
expect like a big game from Ingram and McCollum, and maybe even like a bounce back from Valanciunas because that was horrendous.
yeah, my guess is that the Kings starting five, their front court is what Barnes, Keegan Murray, Sabonis, so
Hmm.
they could probably get away with starting Trey Murphy in that matchup. That's my
Cool.
guess.
That's what I
And
was
we'll
thinking.
probably yeah, and for the most part, this latter part of the season, like they've kind of had Valanciunas play some of the earlier parts of the game, and then they have Larry Nance Jr. play the latter parts of
Yeah.
the game. So they'll probably just continue to do that. Because outside of Sabonis, they don't really have other bigs that you're really, worried or
Yeah.
concerned about. I
Because of
guess
what they got,
Alex Len.
Len. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess Len sometimes comes out there. I guess Trey Lyles at times, but like, those aren't the same types of bigs as, um, some other teams, that some other teams might have, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not like you're going against AD. You're going against Sabonis.
Right. It should be an interesting game, I think. Like I said, I think we're expecting probably expecting some big games from both sets of stars, I think. And, the role players will kind of fit in because I think Keegan Murray's probably going to cool down. No hate,
Mhm.
but I just think, asking him to put up back-to-back crazy games is a little bit unfair, knowing the kind
I
of
think,
player he is at this point.
yeah, I think my thought process is the Pelicans defense should probably be fine with or without Zion. It's more so just like what does the offense look like?
Right.
Mainly just because again, the other guys hadn't really played well. Like McCollum was not very good in the last game against LA.
Yeah.
And like, obviously neither was Ingram. But it's a different matchup, right? You're not playing the Lakers where, it's LeBron, AD, and a bunch of other guys. It's, Sacramento where they don't have as big or as physical of a front court other than Sabonis. So, like I said, that's why I have to give New Orleans a chance to win the game. Um, because again, they still have talent outside of Zion. It's just a matter of are they actually going to show up in
Yeah.
this game? Because I would think that an injury, the fact that Zion's already going to be out for at least a couple of weeks would be pretty deflating, to that group.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're going Sacramento. Is that your final lock in for now?
51-49. I don't
Okay.
feel good about it.
Okay.
Like I said,
I mean, we have another day to decide, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me at all. Like if New Orleans just kind of came out and just kind of, I don't know, just clutched it out. But it doesn't seem like Ingram is the same. If he was fine, like if he hadn't have gotten hurt and he was playing at the level that he was before the injury, I would feel pretty comfortable in picking the Pelicans even without Zion. But
Sure.
with Ingram seemingly like he just doesn't seem the same, it's kind of hard for me to to trust it.
Yeah, that's understandable for sure.
Yeah, and that's
yeah.
and that's really the thing is the injuries have kind of taken the win out of a lot of these matchup sales, basically.
Yeah. And like even like to go back to the East, I feel like, the 76ers game, that was a little bit anticlimactic because I think we were expecting a little bit more from Embiid, but we kind of got, I guess, humbled and brought back down to earth where, this is a guy who was reeling from a very significant injury, and he's just doing the job that he's asked to do. So I think he'll continuously get better. It's just a matter of time.
I mean, yeah, that's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, do we have any other talking points that we want to talk about?
I mean,
because there isn't really much in terms of the East,
Yeah. I mean, I guess, you had the Jonte Porter stuff. We'll probably get into that regular.
Forgot about that.
Stuff. Yeah, that's banned from the NBA.
Yeah.
Obviously everybody knows what went on there, right? Betting on himself, setting up some others, for bets, right? 20,000, I think was what he got. And it ended up being a lifetime ban. So not really a good feeling there if you're Jonte Porter, but yeah, that's not exactly the most amazing thing in the world to do. Not really a smart.
It's crazy. I think they officially said that he disclosed confidential information about his own health status to a anonymous individual he knew to be an NBA bettor. Like that's kind of wild. And yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. $80,000 online bet that he would underperform, and then which would have paid out to 1.1 million. It's crazy, but I guess that kind of begs the question, like, do you think this was the right punishment? I think it was, personally. Now you're just going to have to hold everybody to that standard, and I think that brings upon the conversation of, like, what if, like, a superstar does that? Like, I'm not just throwing out a name here. It's not going to happen, hopefully, but, like, say Shea. Like, what if Shea starts betting, right?
Right.
If he gets caught, is he going to get banned from the league? Who knows? Like, that's the problem. Like, now you've set the precedent, so now kind of have to keep that ban hammer going.
Right, yeah. I mean, yeah, the ban didn't really surprise me because it kind of felt like, based off a lot of the reporting, that it was kind of being set up, for a potential ban. And everybody was wondering because it was the first time that this has happened in the NBA, right? We've heard about it, I think, in football and some other sports as well, but not the NBA, until this point. So I think they kind of just wanted to just kind of, just put a stop to it right now so that way nobody thinks of doing it again. So I think that was probably the right decision there. It's just, but like you said, I think you would think that if you already saw a guy get banned from the NBA, then nobody's going to think about doing that.
Yeah, you'd be surprised though. Trust me. It is crazy though.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you factor in, right, like, the depths at which they were trying, to pull this stuff off, and they still got caught, with their hand in the cookie jar. So not really, again, not a wise thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, like, looking around the news outside of that, we already talked about Kobe White. We already talked about the Bulls, 76ers, Jimmy Butler as well. What's up?
Yeah, what do you think about the USA basketball roster?
Ooh, yeah, that's a great topic. I like it. I like the roster. I've heard a lot of people talking a lot of trash about Jrue Holiday. I understand it. But I really like him being on the roster because I think you need defense. You need guys who know their role at that point. But overall, I think the roster is great. I saw they gave out all the jerseys and stuff. And I think they're going to be competitive. I think that's the goal, obviously. It's the Olympics. Normally, we kind of just show out and steamroll in the Olympics, whereas the FIBA World Cup, we tend to take a seat back sometimes, just depending on what the circumstances are. But I think we're golden this year. No pun intended.
Yeah, I think, in a lot of those, FIBA games, you can kind of see like which guys where it's like, oh, their games make a lot of sense, like in a FIBA World Cup environment. And then the other ones, right, don't really make, that much sense, right? Like, because if you put a bunch of guys together,
Good
Mover
night,
says
Brady.
good night. Yeah, good night, buddy. But like, for a lot of these guys that we saw in the World Cup, right? Some of them, the guys that were kind of mainly one-on-one players that always had the ball in their hands. Like, say, I think Ingram, right? He was on the team. He was on the FIBA roster or whatever. And when he didn't have the ball in his hands, right, he wasn't really doing much else, right? But then you saw like some of the other lineups where it was like what it was like Tyrese Halliburton, or Austin Reeves or other guys like that, where those guys were kind of clicking together because their games aren't necessarily just, I mean, I know Halliburton has the ball in his hands a ton, but he can also do some other stuff. Like he can just shoot off
Yeah.
the ball. Obviously, he can pass, very well. So, I mean, the fit kind of matters. And I think you do have some guys that should fit well together. I mean, I know a lot of these guys, not all of them, many of them are kind of one-on-one guys. But then you also have some guys that are good playmakers and passers. You have some good defenders in that mix. You have some good rebounders, right? Because that seemed like a problem in the FIBA, World Cup where it's like Jaren Jackson Jr. playing at the center spot, and that's not exactly a strong part of his game.
Sure.
So this roster makes a lot more sense. It's just a matter of again, what do they do with it?
Yeah, and it's like just for everybody who's watching, it's Bam Adebayo, Devin Booker, Steph Curry, AD, KD, Anthony Edwards, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Halliburton, Drew Holiday, LeBron, Kawhi, Jason Tatum. Pretty solid roster all around, I think. And then you have some guys I think that'll play, their roles like Drew Holiday, Tyrese Halliburton, facilitator, And I think there's some difference makers on this roster for sure.
I mean, again, I think that this one should be, I think it would be a major upset if they ended up not pulling that one off.
Yeah.
Because I mean, now you're kind of putting more of your, you know, upper tier guys, in there as opposed to, some of the other guys that are more like in that second, third tier,
Hmm.
right? You obviously you have some guys that are a little bit older, but they're still good, and you have it balanced out with some other young guys as well, right? Like, you know, even though you have LeBron, Durant, and Steph that are older, you still have other guys like Tatum or Booker, or AD or Edwards or other guys like that, right?
Yes.
That are, in the latter stage of their career. So I think it's a much more balanced roster that makes a lot more sense. So
Yeah.
I mean, and again, my guess is that the guys that are on there, right, they're going to be committed because we had heard about this for a while, right? Where like some of where we had heard about LeBron trying to recruit some of these guys, and these guys are like, yeah, let's get it done.
Yeah, I think it's a great concept, great roster, like you said. And I think, they kind of have elite depth at every position, which you would kind of expect. But specifically the center position, I really like what they've got going on there with Joel Embiid, which is a huge deal, I think. Anthony Davis as well, and then obviously Bam Adebayo as the third string. So it's going to be wild, I think, to see what the fit is going to be, what the combination of lineups are going to be, especially who's going to start as well. But yeah, should be really fun to watch.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, again, my guess is that the vets are probably going to get the starts for the most part, just because like I think are kind of the guys that sort of put the team together, sort of, and then there'll probably be a couple other guys to balance it out.
Hmm.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, and again, like it, going back to the playoff stuff, it's just kind of unfortunate where you have so many stars that were healthy for most of the season, and now it seems like playing most of those games now is kind of coming back to bite them, unfortunately. I know Butler missed a decent amount of time this season, right? But even a guy like a Giannis, right, who was healthy for the vast majority of the season, right, gets hurt right at the end, and now we don't even know when he's going to be playing in that series, right? And that changes the course of that series, as we had talked about in the previous live stream, right? Where if he doesn't come back, I mean, or if he comes back too late, they might be done in the first round, and that obviously changes the course of what might happen with the Bucks, right? The Clippers, it sounds like Kawhi will be back for game one, so but what does he look like after not having played in a couple weeks or whatever? Um, but yeah, just kind of rough. But either way, the USA will win gold. They better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they should. They need
But
to.
yeah, but yeah, just in general, I mean, like it's just, again, I think the play-in obviously is a positive, right? It's just kind of unfortunate how we've seen both the good and the bad, because I think, it's a good concept and you would like to mainly see the good, but unfortunately we've seen some more negative aspects of it where, you have teams in the 7-8 spot where if there was no play-in, they'd just be in the playoffs. But instead they're in the play-in, they have to play an extra game that they wouldn't normally have to. Then they get hurt, then they drop the second game, and then their season is done. But, at the same time, then it also gives the 9, 10 seeds, right, a chance to potentially make it. We haven't had a 10 seed make it.
Yeah.
But we have had a 9 make it a couple of times, right? I think New Orleans did it, and the Grizzlies did it. So, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, should the 10 really need to be there at all? Should it just be 9, or like, are you okay with 9, 10? I guess to balance it out with 7, 8.
I like the 10.
Okay.
I think it provides a little bit of hope. Like I said last night about the NFL wild card, I think, it's always nice to have that underdog factor. And I think you kind of lose that once you change it up a little bit. But that's just me. I do know some people are like, why is the 10 here? Like, they suck. Like, they lose every time. But who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I guess if you only had 3, it would probably be a little bit. I don't know if you could actually like really balance that out.
Yeah.
So then it would be like, well, if you take out 10, then that means you'd have to take out 7. Then
Yeah.
it would just be like 8 and 9 play against each other, and then whoever wins that is just 8, as opposed
Yeah.
to it just as opposed to what it is now, where it's 7 and 8 and 9 and 10.
Yeah, because I feel like if they start meddling with like the structure of the tournament, and like you were talking about with the cutoff and stuff like that, I feel like we might be getting into like in-season tournament kind of levels of confusion, which I don't think would be good for both parties. Where the fans are going to be a little bit confused, and then teams might botch something. Who knows? But like for me personally, I just like it the way it is, and whoever wins, you just win, and whoever loses, you go home.
Yeah, exactly. And then, last but not least,
Mhm.
because this will probably be, the last topic, before, we call it, it sounded like that they're planning on maybe making a rule change with the in-season tournament, right?
Okay.
Where, I believe, winning, or advancing in the NBA Cup, can give you the tiebreaker, against some of these teams, right? So there's a proposal to make advancement in the NBA Cup into the primary tiebreaker for postseason seeding. So obviously, there's going to be a lot of things to consider, right? Because obviously, normally the tiebreaker is the head-to-head, right? When the two teams, how many games they've won against each other in the regular season series. Um, and then I think they're trying to figure out like what should the order be? Like, should it be the primary tiebreaker? Should it be the secondary tiebreaker? Because I think you would like to have the in-season tournament have some type of positive impact, I guess, on the regular season, or I guess potential playoff, situations or whatever. A lot of people have thrown out different things. I think some of them just it makes it too favorable for the in-season tournament winner, where it's like an automatic playoff seeding.
Sure.
It's like I don't think you should do that because, like,
Right.
if the Detroit Pistons, right, won the in-season tournament, right, then you'd have a team that won, that lost 60 plus games, in the playoffs. Like, I don't think you necessarily want that. Um, but I think something like a tiebreaker probably would be okay. Obviously, because it's like a scenario. I guess it's a scenario that normally doesn't happen a ton. But obviously, with there being more good teams, we've seen these records be a lot closer. Some people also think that maybe the winner should just get that as an extra win. I don't know. That would be kind of weird because then it'd be 83 games. Maybe if you lose, like it just doesn't count against you. I don't know. But I mean, what do you think of potentially of those type of changes?
I mean, I like the head-to-head thing with the lower level tiebreaker or whatever. I really like that because I think there does need to be one more incentive, maybe outside of the money. Overall for the entire roster, that would be really cool. And like you said, I think it would be a little bit too ambitious and a little bit corny, in my opinion, if you could literally get like a playoff spot off of the in-season tournament. Because I think the problem is nobody's taking it seriously at the moment. Like, I'm not, okay, maybe I should rephrase that. They're taking it seriously, but I don't think it's at that level where you can literally just throw in a playoff spot for up for grabs. Like, I don't think that would be realistic in my opinion. But yeah, I think if you can find a way to incentivize it even more without, completely ruining the integrity of the game, by all means, please do it. Like, I really do like that, that tiebreaker one a lot.
mean, and we'll get into probably more discussion in it, once we have our regular episode. But
Yeah.
just it's kind of, but again, they've tried to add some different things in there, so it'll be intriguing, to kind of see how that ends up panning out, right? Because again, a lot of these changes, have kind of come over the last few years, right? As they tried to find more and more ways, I think, to give the regular season more meaning, right? Because a lot of people, I think, when the regular season goes on, a lot of times some people will just kind of tune out for months, right? Where it's like, oh, let me check in on how my team is doing. I haven't watched them in like a month and a half or something like that. And then it's like, oh, it's the in-season tournament. That's cool. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, is that everything? Is that all we had to talk about tonight?
yeah, I mean, I guess happy retirement, Blake Griffin. You had a really
Yeah.
awesome career.
Great
A
career,
lot of
man.
great memorable moments. A lot of posters, right? Kind of cool how he was able to, adjust and add on to his game over time, right? Initially, he kind of came in as just an athlete, with some, raw, that was kind of raw, right? Obviously, he had some, some skills in terms of passing and whatnot. But then over time, right, he became a better ball handler, he became a better shooter. He was playing more point forward, so just unfortunate, where injuries were kind of a factor, that kind of derailed, the latter part of his career where, he was, a star player, what, like 5 years ago, I think, for Detroit or
Yeah.
whatever. And then after that, he just kind of just fell off.
Yeah, the Lob City and Detroit years were actually insane. If you really think about what he was doing at the time, freak athlete, could jump out of the building and then, added on to it. Like you said, eventually even developed, the jump shot, which I think was definitely a game changer for him. Just like you said, unfortunately got hit with huge injuries. But yeah, shout out to him. He had a great career, and I hope he enjoys retirement a lot.
Former #1 pick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much it for, today's episode of All Fault, the stream
Yeah.
for All Fault playing discussion.
Yeah, so like I said, or like you just said, that's pretty much it for today's live stream. We thank everybody who came through and chatted. Thank you, Movers, Zay Williams, Keith Wells, everybody who chatted in this live stream tonight. We should be having one on Friday as well, and that'll be coupled with our live episode, or not live, but pre-recorded episode like we normally do. Once again, thank you for coming into this live stream. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates. And we will see you guys on Friday.